Artistry 3's Duality is the combination of a tribute to photographers, lighting experts, and expressionist painters who broke the norms through their use of color. As the name hopefully implies, Duality sets out to create or recreate a popular photography lighting style by which a subject is lit on both sides using a different colored gel lighting on each side to create a strong contrast in the lighting of a subject. While this can certainly be useful on photographs, we've included it here because it looks amazing as a starting point to uniquely color one of your subjects in a photograph and then take it further by turning it into digital art conversion after running this effect. So let's explore this action and I'll demonstrate how it all works. So the first step is to open an image with a main subject that you want to light creatively. So next, open up the Dualighty Action group and click on Step 1, Select Focus, and then click Play at the bottom of your Actions panel. This dialog box will pop up instructing you to use a hard brush to paint over your main subject on the main focus area layer, effectively creating a selection of your main subject. As noted here, you want to try and create as precise a selection as possible. So let's click Stop to do this now. And I'm going to close the Actions panel out of the way for now. Okay, great. So now there's a couple of ways to doing this. One way is to use the hard brush to paint over the subject on this main focus area layer, ensuring that your brush opacity and flow are both set to 100% here in the top bar. And again, you want to be as precise as possible for this particular effect, and be sure that your opacity and flow are 100%, or there will be errors that pop up when the action runs. Okay, so another way of getting maybe a more precise selection is to use the quick selection tool. I prefer this method myself for creating the most precise selection. So to use this method, click on the background layer to make it active, since that's the only layer right now that contains the subject that we're going to select here, using the quick selection tool. Then you can choose the quick selection tool from the toolbar or press W to activate it. Now the size of this tool can be adjusted by pressing the square bracket keys to either increase or decrease the size. And all we do now is click where we want to select our subject. Now, hair is always a bit tricky, so I'm just going to do it quickly for this demo. Now you can click and release as many times as you would like, and if you make a mistake and select something, like let's go outside this area here by accident, you can hold down the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on a PC and then click again in that area to deselect that area. Then you can just release the Option key or Alt key and again continue on with your selection until your subject is fully and precisely selected. So let's just take a moment here and get as precise a selection as possible. Okay, great. Okay, that looks good. So next, now we're going to click back on the main focus area and then press Shift D to fill the selection with the foreground color. Now you might have some areas that didn't get selected, and if you do, that's very easy to fix. Simply click back on the background layer again and then continue clicking where you would like to select. Then go back to the main focus area one more time and press Shift D again to fill in those remaining areas. Okay, and for the purpose of this demonstration, that's going to work well here. So once you have your subject selected on the main focus area, open up your Actions panel again, and we'll click on Step 2, Run Duality, and click Play at the bottom of the Actions panel. Now, depending on the speed and specifications of your computer, this action may take a few moments to complete. Okay, super. Once this dialog box appears, the action and lighting effect is complete. So let's close the Actions panel out of the way here. Okay, great. Now this effect has a number of layers here to allow for some really custom control over the final image, including changing the default lighting gels of blue and yellow to any colors you desire. So let's start at the top layer first and work our way down to see what sort of control we have over the final image here. So if your layer groups are not all collapsed and you're seeing a long list of multiple layers and groups, hold down the Option and Command keys on a Mac or the Alt and Control keys on a PC. And while you're holding down these two keys, click on the top layer group toggle arrow to collapse all groups to make things more tidy and viewable. So our first layer group controls the contrast in our main subject. And for lighting effects, contrast can have a dramatic impact over the final resulting image. So if we toggle this group open, you'll see the first layer in the group controls the bottom shadow area here. If I turn the visibility of this layer on and off, you can see how we have this bottom shadow area, which is characteristic of this lighting style. So you can turn the visibility on or off or adjust the opacity of this if necessary. And next we have a series of rim lighting layers. So rim lighting are the way that the light interacts around the edges of the subject when lighting a subject in this way. So the thin rim light layer here controls the visibility and strength of the thinnest part of the rim lighting. It's very subtle, but it does affect the realism of this lighting style, since we're adding colored lights that really aren't there to begin with. The next layer is a bit more obvious and controls the softer rim lighting, or the fall off from the lighting on each side of the subject. So if I turn the visibility of this layer on and off, you can see the areas that we're affecting here. And you can keep it on or reduce the opacity if you need a softer look on this part of the lighting. So next is the hot rim light, and this will appear differently with every different photograph that you work with. So here we're controlling the amount of white light, or the hottest parts of the rim lighting. Now the default opacity here is set to 55%, so you can either increase or decrease the strength of this layer by adjusting the opacity up or down. Now, next up is our subject quote-unquote grit control here. This is essentially a contrast control, which gives our subject more of a gritty look, but it's also common with this lighting style. We see this particularly in portraits of athletes and trading cards or movie posters of action heroes. So if I zoom back out to, let's say, 50%, okay, we can see the amount of grit that we can introduce or reduce by adjusting the layer opacity as well. So now the last layer in this group controls the overall subject contrast. And this is a good one to experiment with. So click on the layer to make it active and slide the fill slider here to play with the contrast in your main image. Now you'll see how this affects the subject, and you may even wish to come back to this layer later in the process also. But for now, I'm going to leave it near the default of 35% here. Yeah. Okay, so let's close up this layer group. And now we have the Change Light Colors group. Now, if I toggle this group open, we have two color swatches here, both with their visibility turned off by default. That's because our effect is making use of the default color area layers below. So now before we go and pick our custom lighting colors, let's also open up the layers inside the default lighting group. So here you can see we have the default lighting colors for both the left and right sides of the image. Now you have control over the left side lighting, the left rim lighting color, whereas before we were controlling the contrast of the rim lighting earlier, not the color. But here we can adjust the rim lighting color if necessary, and also the color in the left edge or that fall off lighting area. And we also have the lighting on the left side of the background, and all of these same controls for the right side. Now we've done this to allow for two ways of changing the lighting colors. The first and easiest way will be to turn off the visibility of the default lighting group. So let's do that now. And now we have no colored lighting at all. Now we can turn on the visibility of the custom lighting swatches on the left and right sides, and then double click on the swatches to change the lighting color. So let's make this one more of a darker, sort of grayish cyan color here. Yeah, and click OK. And let's double click on the right side custom lighting swatch and go with a bright sort of reddish purple tone here. Okay, and that looks good on this image. Okay. Now, we still have some control over this look. For example, I feel like the blue is a bit strong still, so I can click the layer to make it active. And let's bring down the opacity to maybe like 80%, let's say. Yeah, that's good. Now, you can lower it even further if you want to have just one side lit. So like this, I'll bring it down to, let's go down to 25%. And you can see how the blue fades away and the red fills in a little bit more. And you can do this for the other side, and you can get some really cool cinematic effects by removing color on one side like this. But I do like the dual tone, so let's go back up. Let's go maybe to 85% here. Okay, good. So now that's how you can control the color of your lights. Or if you really want to get detailed with it, you can turn off the visibility of the change light colors group and then turn back on the visibility of the default lighting group and make separate color adjustments for each of those areas in the lighting. You can have a lot of fun here and get really detailed and creative. So just have fun, go wild with your lighting there. So I'll leave this with our new custom light colors, and I'll close these two groups. And next up, we have some control over the main subject base. So let's open up this layer group and see what we can do here. Now, the first layer here allows us to restore some of the original color of your main subject, if you like. So click on the original color restore layer and increase the opacity to bring back some of the original color tones in your main subject. Now, this is very subtle, and it's particularly useful if you're planning to really reduce or remove one side of the colored lighting. So if I crank up the opacity to, let's say, 75%, yeah, okay, and then let's just go back to one of those custom lighting colors and let's turn off the blue side visibility, and you can see how the original color here is restored. But this effect is all about dual lighting for now. So let's go back to turning on those lights, both sides. And okay, the next layer here controls our subject sharpness. So you can toggle the visibility on or off or adjust the opacity to control this effect. And you can also toggle open the smart filter controls and double click on the high pass smart filter here and increase the radius for more sharpening on the details or decrease it for less. So we'll keep it around the default for now here. And we have similar controls for the smoothness layer. Now with this type of lighting style, it has the effect of making subjects appear smoother than reality. So if I zoom into 100% here, and we'll go to our subject's face, 100%. Okay, you can see when I toggle the visibility of the smoothness layer on and off, how that affects the image. And again, we can open up the smart filter controls for this layer and double click on the surface blur layer, or surface blur effect, and make further adjustments if necessary. And you can click OK to apply or cancel to keep the defaults. So now let's zoom back out to, let's say, 50% or so here. Okay, so the next is our subject base, which we need to keep intact. And beneath that layer, we have the subject backlighting shape. So here you can adjust the opacity for a stronger or reduced backlighting, but around 50%, I think that looks good. So I can toggle this layer group closed. And lastly, we have some control over the background. So if I toggle this layer group open, I can double click on this first gradient and control the spread of these background colors by adjusting the scale up or down here. So I'm just going to click cancel to keep the default, which looks pretty great already. And lastly, if necessary, you can control the background color. So if our default background color is a nice dark gray, but we can lighten it or darken it, or even change it to a different color entirely for some really unique effects. So, or I'm just going to click cancel to keep it at the default, but I can also reduce the opacity to reveal the original background, which can be useful if you're planning to run like a further art or painting style conversion on the effect following this lighting technique, which is actually what we intended this action to be used for in the first place. And that brings us to the conclusion. That's our duality action. So I hope you have a lot of fun playing with light and color here. You'll find that this one works wonderfully on portraits and images where you plan on taking things further with an artistic conversion after the fact. So remember to keep your selections precise for the best effect and just have a really fun time using this action. So thank you all very much again, and happy Photoshopping.